Thanks everyone for joining me for another episode on the Travel Collective, where I have amazing, interesting conversations with lots of people with travel interests. I'm excited to chat with Yvonne today. Thanks for joining me.
I'm glad to be here.
Oh, wonderful. So I know we were chatting about England, about your father, a little bit about travel. So you mentioned in the pre-interview you've been to England about, and some people call it Great Britain. It's called UK. It's been called many things, the mother country, um,
Mhm.
12 times. Was that your first international trip? Tell us about it.
The first international trip was in 1969. And that was back in the days when you could do Europe on $5 a day.
Wow.
And we were at our local AAA place trying to plan where we were going to go and what we were going to do. I was doing this with the secretary in my school. And we were talking about renting a car. And he said, well, Yvonne, do you have a car? And I said, no. He said, why don't you get one in Europe? I said, I can do that. He said,
Yeah.
yeah. He said, it's a really good deal. He said, think about a Volkswagen Bug.
Oh, fun.
Think about this $1,900 is what it cost me.
Wow. Which back then,
So,
though, was still quite a lot of money.
yeah. So, the girl I was traveling with, Carol, said, if you get the car, then what we would have spent on renting a car, I'll pick up half of that in gas. I'll take care of the gas. So she and I had a route that was laid out by the AAA for us with this nice big map, and off we went.
Oh my gosh.
And it started in England, and then we took a ferry to Belgium,
Oh
and
wow.
that's where I picked up the car. And 7,200 miles later, through all these different countries, putting the car on a ferry to go from Italy to Greece and
Oh
back
my
again.
gosh.
Yeah. So 7,200 miles later, in August, we went in June and we came back in August. We drove on the wrong side of the road with her being my eyes and put the car on a boat, and it came back to the United States, and I drove it for more years.
Wow. So it really paid off in the end to just buy the car over there and use it for your travels and then
Yeah.
pay to have it shipped. Oh, that's amazing.
And because we were doing it on such a tight budget, we would look for campgrounds, and we would pull into the campground, take our luggage out of the car, put it underneath the car in case it rained. Um, I slept in the back seat. Carol slept in the front seat. And y'all know how small a VW bug is. But we were young. And we would use the facilities at the campground. And then if we really, really wanted a good night's sleep, we would find a hotel so that we could take a hot shower or hot bath and crawl under the covers on a nice comfy bed. And that's how we spent the summer.
Wow. Oh, how fabulous. And the things you must have seen. Did you ever have any like mishaps that you wondered, how did we end up here? What are we
I
doing?
think pulling out of the car dealership, I put a bump in the front fender. So that's the little mishap. It just crinkled it. But I was kind of grateful for it because I said, okay, well, I've done it. So now I don't have to worry about it again. Um, we didn't really have any mishaps. We had incredible experiences. We stopped in Germany at a restaurant, and if I looked at a map, I'd be able to tell you it was the point at which two rivers came together. And it was a night we decided a hotel.
Yeah.
And the owner of the restaurant and hotel said that he was a POW
Oh
during the
my
Second World
gosh.
War in the United States.
Oh, in the United States.
Yeah, a German soldier in the United States, POW during the First or Second World War. He said he was treated so well
Wow.
when he was here that when it came time, he asked if he could stay. And they said no. So they sent him back. So he put together this really special meal for us because he said he so loved the Americans. And then he asked me to do him a favor. His daughter was in what would have been fifth grade,
Mm-hmm.
and she was learning English.
Right.
He said, would you let her read to you?
Wow.
So here I am sitting in this restaurant having a coaching session or an education session with this little girl. And I remember clearly we would say worked, or we would say plant. She didn't necessarily add the ed on correctly. So every time we came to that, I would coach her. So that stuck in my mind. He then got us in his car and took us touring around this little city. And he
Wow.
took us way up on the other side of the river was a crest or a hill. And he said, and this is where um, all of the fortresses were built because they could look down on the city.
Mm-hmm.
So those kinds of things happened to us.
Wow.
Um, we
How
met.
moving to meet that man, how and to say such wonderful things and make you feel so welcome as an American. Because even in the 60s, there's still that leftover in the older generation of what had happened in some of those
Mhm,
countries. I mean, horrible things. Wow.
yeah. Um, when we were in Greece, we were kind of taken under the wings of a couple of American GIs who kind of took us all around. Uh, when we were up on the Acropolis, we went to the side where there was absolutely nothing. And one of the GIs said, this is the exact spot where Paul preached.
Wow.
And and there are times when that will come up in the lectionary for church where the inhabitant said, well, this is where we can build a building for Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul said, no, that's not what he was all about. That's not who he was. You don't need to have a church. So there I am standing on the spot where Paul preached. So there were those kinds of things that happened
Yeah.
while we were gone.
Oh, that's great. It's so good that you and the secretary got along so well because sometimes picking the right travel companion too can be a kind of a make or break for a trip.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, that was the trip that did it for me. I was just so enamored with the idea of travel. I was so enamored with eating different foods, with meeting different people, with seeing different things. Uh, we did a part of our tour took us, let me see if I can get this right, from Switzerland into Austria, back into Switzerland, back into Austria. Um, Hairbend turns, going through the mountains, some of the most beautiful scenery I've ever seen in my life. My aunt, Josephine, had sponsored some Italian Roman Catholic nuns. And their story was that during the Second World War, they prayed that if their orphanage and their convent weren't hit, then when the war was over, that they would do some missionary work in the United States.
Oh, wow.
So they came to the United States and they spent 6 weeks in Scranton, which is where my Aunt Jo lived. And my Aunt Jo took care of them, gave them a place to stay, food all of the time. They were collecting money so that they could build an orphanage here in the United States. And so Aunt Joe, knowing that I was going to take this trip, wrote to the Mother Superior and wrote a letter for me to give to the Mother Superior so that when we got to Rome, maybe I would have a place to stay.
Right.
We found it.
Oh
Now,
my
if you can,
gosh.
we found it.
Yeah.
I'm in a VW bug and I'm driving. It's rush hour traffic.
Oh no, no. Yeah, yeah. Oh gosh.
If you've been to Italy during rush hour traffic, okay. So Carol's doing the directing. No, 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 no GPS.
I was just gonna say for those listeners, this is pre-internet. You don't have a voice telling you turn right, turn left. You had none of that. Someone's literally trying to read the map, read the signs, and you're trying to drive at the same time and make split-second decisions.
So I was on the right hand side of a 5-lane traffic circle. And in order to go to where I needed to go to, I had to get completely over to the left,
Right.
to take the last exit off the traffic circle. I did it. I would
Yay.
no more do that now than fly to the moon.
Right, exactly. None of us would. We do everything to avoid that.
So those are some of the experiences that I had when I was in Europe. And it gave me the love of travel.
Oh yeah, and the just the stories you brought back for your students, and that probably renewed interest in working then again because you've had this amazing experience during the summer.
I did use those stories a lot, and it would have been much later. But one of my students cornered me in the hallway, and she said something like, "You tell such wonderful stories. How did you get to do all of those things?"
Oh
I
yeah.
said, "I'm just living my dream." And I hope that sparked something in her, that we didn't have to stay stuck. Um, the other thing it did for me is that when I was in England, I met someone and we stayed in contact. And when I went back to visit in England, we were sitting talking, and he was a teacher and I was a teacher. And he said, "Why don't we do exchange visits?"
Oh.
So, why not?
Yeah, why not? Right.
So the English kids came to us, okay, and stayed with pen pal families. We went to England. Um, when they were here in the United States, then I would do the planning with my parent group about where we were going to go and what we were going to see and that kind of thing. And the same was true when we went overseas. We went to the York Minster.
Oh.
Now, this is the cathedral,
Yes. Oh
and
yeah.
it's my favorite cathedral in the whole wide world.
Oh wow.
Um, and when the bus dropped us off, the driver said, "How long do you want to stay?" And I said, 15 minutes. He said, no, 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 no. You need at least an hour. I'll be back in an hour. Well, once we got inside, of course I understood why we were going to need an hour. When we came out, the deal was, okay, check your watches.
Right.
There's all kinds of shopping if you just go down this way.
Right.
That really narrow street in York,
Mm-hmm.
okay, with all of it was gorgeous. But anyway, I looked at one of the kids and I said, "Paul, are you all right?" And he said, "No, I'm not."
Hmm.
I said, "Okay, do you want to come with us or would you rather just be by yourself?" He said, "I'd like to be alone, but I'll be back at the bus at the right time." Okay.
Yeah.
The following day, my best friend went on this trip. So the following day, Mary Catherine said, "Why don't we go to lunch?" At lunch, she said, "What happened to you yesterday? What
Yeah.
was it? Can you tell me?"
Right.
And he said, "I was in that cathedral, and the people who started to build it never saw it completed."
Right.
The people who completed it never saw it to begin, its beginnings, rather. And he said, it made me understand how really selfish I am. I've never done anything like that. And those folks did it for the idea of God.
Wow.
So, what our kids came back with in terms of what they'd seen, and I run into them maybe every once in a while, and I will get from them rather, how absolutely marvelous that
Oh,
trip was.
yeah. Oh, I'm sure. And just this, just like this one student in the course of that one afternoon, to be so moved and transformed almost by the
Uh-huh.
reality that, yes, years ago people started things knowing they aren't going to get to see its completion, but we're doing it for the greater, or
Mm-hmm.
those that are coming after us. What can we do for those people?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. How incredibly rewarding too to start this exchange program of the students going back and forth, and again, pre-internet, before you're able to really research and pull up maps and see where a place. I mean, it's a lot of, for me, I remember as a kid, you'd go to the library, you might ask people in the community that may have gone, go to the AAA office, get whatever resources, books, magazines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and before going, I had the kids read a little Beowulf, and I had them, read
Yes.
some of the really famous English literature and talking about kings and all that stuff. It really was a remarkable trip for all of us. Uh, the second trip we took was 1978, and we went, I believe, in June. In April of 1978, I lost my brother. He
Oh.
was in a car accident,
Oh my gosh.
and it was instantaneous. Thank goodness. When we went back to the York Minster again, all right, I wasn't going to miss out on this.
No.
Mary Catherine, who was dating my brother at the time, we walked into the Minster. Both of us took one look at each other and started to sob.
Oh yeah.
The girls in our troop in our group just came around and held us. There were about five of them rather, that just held us while we cried.
Wow. So moving. It's making me want to cry. I can feel it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But yet you
So the
felt
re
compelled to continue doing the trip for the students. I mean, that's,
and because I loved travel so much, I was single for quite some time. I chose to go back to England and Ireland and Scotland and Wales because I understood the language. And for me, traveling alone and being able to understand the language was key.
yes, yeah. For many of us, I think it's still key, even though now we have Google Translate. But
Yeah.
still, there is a difference between just having that conversation. And I think I always encourage travelers to learn a few words of the native language of where you're going. I mean, yes, so many people in the world now, for them, learning our language, English,
Hmm.
is preferred for business and it'll help them. But for us, it's that sign of respect and that sign of curiosity and wanting to know their roots, what their culture.
Hmm. Hmm. It
I
was,
feel like I've had many doors open just by stumbling through a few bad words of trying to talk to them in their language, whatever that is.
that happened to me. It just makes me think. I have a T-shirt, and on the back of it, it says, "All who wander are not lost." And I must be a wanderer, that I have that
Yeah.
ingrained in me. So in that first trip in the Bug, I met somebody. We became engaged. I went back to Greece, which was where he was, to find out that he was seeing someone else. And
Oh,
so the engagement kind of fell apart. And I said to myself, I'm not going home. I mean, here I am, right?
yeah.
I've got this opportunity. Um, Again, I was befriended by two American Air Force guys who were stationed over there. They gave me a room in their apartment.
Oh, wow.
They gave me a room in their apartment that they didn't charge me for because I did the cleaning, I did the cooking, and I took their laundry up to the base and I did their laundry for them.
Oh, wow.
So I was like this housekeeper.
Yeah.
And one of them came home one night after work and he said, would you like to earn some more money? Well, earning more money meant I could stay longer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I became the maid for two American Air Force captains. One would pick me up in the morning and I would go to his apartment and I would get it all cleaned. And then I would go upstairs to the other apartment and I would get that all clean. And the second Air Force captain would take me home. So we're in the process of talking about me being in Greece. And one of them said to me, do you think you would like to be a stewardess on a Greek yacht? And I said,
Wow.
what would I have to do?
Yeah, exactly. It's Greece. I'm young. I'm not unattached right now. Like, and I love to travel and see the world. What better, you know?
So I went down and I signed up, and the owner had two 175-foot yachts that he rented. He told me what I was going to need to do and what the rules were and all that stuff. And here's where language comes in. I really reported to the cook. The cook was the one that gave me the instructions about what I was supposed to do. And over time, I started to learn to ask him for avga, which are eggs.
Oh, uh-huh.
Okay. And I was learning a little bit of language along the way. It was my responsibility to clean and to keep the bathrooms cleaned up. So I'm standing there because there's no toilet paper on the roll. Now, I don't know the word for toilet paper. How am I going to
Right.
get this through?
Yeah.
So I took the toilet paper roll up and I showed it to him. And then he said, oh, and then he told me what the word was and showed me where, to get it. That those two trips were unreal.
Wow.
The first trip, one of the passengers had lived in the United States until the age of 7. His English was impeccable.
Yeah, I bet. When you learn at such a young age, that's so.
So we would be sailing along and he would see something and he would pull me over and he would explain what it was that we were seeing. The women all in black.
Hmm.
And that simply was that they had lost a loved one. And when they lose a loved one, they wear black from that time on.
Oh, wow.
So when I would see a lot of women in black in Greece, I would know what that was all about.
Right.
Um, the men in this particular cruise wanted to go spearfishing. So they asked me if I would man the rowboat. So they're under the water doing their thing, and I'm just following them in the rowboat. They got fish, they got eel, they got octopus. I mean, they came back with a load. They took me up onto the island, and I could see fresh thyme growing,
Oh
and
my
there's
God.
just this smell of fresh thyme. So oftentimes they would provide me with experiences basically because of the fact that I didn't speak English. And he knew that that might be hard on me. Learn to drink Turkish coffee, learn to make Turkish coffee. Uh, it was night and all the passengers were down below. I slept up in the dining room, and I went out on board and it was warm, and they're cutting through the water. As the water turned over, you could see these neon little neon, I don't know what you would call them, microbes
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe something like that. Yeah.
So here I am, the wind in my face, watching the waves turn over with all this neon stuff
Oh my
and the
God.
stars above. It was breathtaking.
Oh, that is breathtaking. Oh my gosh. Something you would just never, like, otherworldly almost in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of that feeling like, how did I get here? This is amazing. Like, wow.
I have to say, it drove my mother crazy.
I was just gonna ask, as you know, even going back to the summer with the VW, you know, parents are always gonna be parents. We're always gonna care about our children, and taking off as a young 20 something, even if you were 25 at that time, whatever, you know, a parent going, "What? You're going where? You're doing what?" For when you're not coming back for do you know what you're doing? Yeah, what their thoughts were on the traveling, especially that first trip, buying a car, going with your, you know, the secretary.
It was when I traveled alone that um, she really had trouble with that. And a normal routine for me is I would always go down to the house, maybe like the Sunday before I was going to be traveling, and do some laundry and get some things ready. And I was so delighted this one year. She just didn't say anything. She didn't ask me about it. She didn't tell me that she was going to worry. She just was being really good until I got to the top of the stairs and I was about ready to leave and drive back to my apartment. And she said, Yvonne, don't you ever get married.
Oh.
I said, and I said, Mom, why? She said, because you'll have a daughter and she'll grow up and she'll go wandering all over the world all by herself. And then you'll have to worry. So then just don't get married.
Oh, okay. Oh dear.
Yeah. So parent, yes. So she worried. And the same thing happened to me. My stepdaughter, she had wanted to go to specific places in Spain and specific places in Italy. And she did it by herself.
Oh, she did. Oh my
Yeah, she
God.
did. And I have to say,
Wow.
when she was gone, I was a little worried. Now she went safely and she came home safely and she had a good time, but it was almost like at some points mom was laughing at me,
Yes. Oh yeah,
see.
right. Exactly. You can almost feel her on your shoulder saying, "I told you so." Yeah. This is
Yeah,
what you get.
yeah,
Now you
yeah,
know
this
how
is what
I
you get.
felt. Yeah. Because were you able to call even when you were traveling solo like that? I mean, sometimes, I mean, to even make an international phone call or mail would take weeks, I would imagine.
I did postcards. I did postcards as often as I could, to at least let them know I was safe. But no, they had no way to contact me. Um, they did know when I was staying with a friend in England. So they were able to reach him to let me know that one of my favorite uncles had died.
Oh.
And I didn't go home. I stayed in England till the end of the trip, so I did miss the funeral. But interestingly enough, this particular uncle, in his will, left each of his nieces and nephews $50
Wow.
to go out and have a good time on him.
I was just gonna say, I mean, when a and I've you know, sometimes people have asked when my mother was sick, like, well, why would you still travel? And my mother too would say, no, I want you to go and do what you love. If something happens to me, I'd rather know you're out doing what you love. You can't just sit here by my bed or just wait. I mean,
Mm-hmm,
what good does that do for either one of us?
mm-hmm. So, yeah, wise parents sometimes,
Yes.
you know. So those kinds of things happened. But all in all, again, it's my husband and I joined a community choir, and the director at the time was really big on overseas travel.
Oh, nice.
So in the summertime, they were generally 10 days to 2 weeks long, and there would be a travel company that would arrange for the
Mm-hmm.
choir to sing in various venues.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So the first trip was Germany, Austria, and the Czech Republic.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. That's just kind of where I came back from. So there's some
Okay.
fabulous places. Yeah.
Germany, Austria, and the Czech Republic. Uh, most of the time we were singing in churches. And on one night, the church that we were singing in also had a men's choir. And they wrote and said, will you come prepared to sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic?
Hmm.
Okay. So we rehearsed that and practiced that. If you can imagine, like 40 people on the stage, mixed chorus,
Right.
soprano, alto, and bass, and tenor. Then the German choir
Oh, wow.
came out and stood in back of us,
Oh, my goodness.
and they sang. So here we are, 30 men, 45 of us, singing the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and they're really just letting it rip. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
with the bass and all that, you know, all those underneath tones coming
Yeah.
through. And when we finished that in Germany, instead of clapping, the audience stamped their feet.
Oh.
Just different.
Yeah, just
Wonderful, but
different.
different.
Yeah, just different. And some of those spaces to hear music in them is just amazing. I mean, I always recommend go to a performance and just experience some music in some of these spaces. Amazing.
The, the second trip was Russia, Estonia, and Finland.
Oh, wow. Those are places I've never been.
The third trip was Italy and France.
Oh my goodness.
So when you're talking about in these spaces, we were at a tiny little church in Rome. The translation was Saint Agnes of the Agony. And we would always get to the church first, okay, during maybe an hour before the performance, and we would get a chance to rehearse and feel the space.
Right.
And our director said, I want to try something. So he brought us out to the middle of the church, and we're standing underneath the open spire. It's
Right.
open all the way up,
Oh, all the way up. Oh my
all
goodness.
the way up. And he said, get in your parts, but make a circle. We sang the entire concert in a circle.
Wow.
And my best friend was on this trip, and she said the sound just went spiraling up and out. She
Right.
said it was the most incredible thing she's ever heard.
Wow. What an ingenious thought too to do that, to make use of the space and where you were standing and how your voices would carry. Oh, I love that.
Well, he heard something when we were rehearsing, and that's what he had us do. On that trip, we sang at St. Peter's Basilica
Oh,
in
wow.
Rome,
Right.
at St. Mark's in Venice,
Oh my goodness.
at this little church. When we went to France, we sang at Notre Dame
Oh, wow.
before the fire.
Yes, exactly. Before the fire.
And then the most special for me on that trip was we sang at the American Cemetery, Omaha Beach,
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
D-Day.
Right. Wow.
And it's raining. You
Kind of
know, we've got
perfect. Kind of perfect for the mood and the right.
and we've got on slickers, and every morning they have a special program that opens up the cemetery. Okay. And so we were the program for that day. The person who connected overseas with our director said, we always do a laying of the wreath.
Right.
Who would you like that wreath dedicated to? He dedicated it to his father, who had been in the army during World War II.
Oh, he did. Oh, wow.
So it was even more special because when we saw the wreath, we saw that it was dedicated to his dad and all of the men from Pennsylvania who fought during the Second World War.
Wow.
My father is from Pennsylvania, so here I am, World War II veteran too.
Right.
We sing the national anthem, and it's got to be the best arrangement that I've ever heard. I mean, it makes it a musical piece because it's difficult to sing.
Mm-hmm.
So the adults in the choir have to back up. The sun breaks through,
Oh my goodness. Oh, wow.
and we're singing the national anthem. And those of us who are older, the tears, right,
Oh, yes.
are streaming down our faces. And the younger folks, we had to explain to them later just exactly why that was so moving.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And to see the sun break through too after you'd started with the rain and the trench coats and just, yeah, that whole arc of just those moments. Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So speaking of your father, did you ever travel with your father? What were his thoughts on traveling?
Um, in 1995, Dad announced that he and Mom were going back to England for the 50th reunion
Oh,
of the end of World War II,
right.
May 8th, 1995. And he said that. I said, Kirk and I are coming.
Yeah, exactly, right. Count
Kirk
us
and I are
in,
coming.
right? We're coming too, right?
Yeah, we're coming too. So we met Dad and Mom and also met a friend of Dad's that he had made over ham radio. That's a story in and of itself.
Oh, well, yeah, exactly.
Um, but the very first thing on that trip was the soldiers were going to get to walk to march again in a parade from the city hall down to the cathedral.
Hmm.
My father couldn't march in the parade in 1945 because he had been in an accident. He'd crashed. He was in his plane and it crashed. He broke his leg. He
Oh,
was in
yeah.
a cast from his hip to his ankle. All right. So he couldn't march. And so now he was finally going to get to march in the parade. So my husband and I are sitting on a wall waiting for this all to start. And it started with, 4 planes, 4 jets,
Yep.
you know, flying over. Every church that had a bell in a steeple were ringing at the beginning of this march. And they did it exactly the same way they did it in 1945. The march was led by Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts.
Hmm.
And then came young British soldiers. And then came World War II British soldiers. And then came the Americans. And the crowd, when the Americans started filing past, just erupted.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting on the wall and I see my dad come by and I'm yelling at the top of my lungs, there's my dad,
Yeah,
there's my dad.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, they marched down to the church. We met my mom and we walked down with her and we went into the church thinking we'll go to the service. Well, you needed a ticket.
Oh.
The woman that was there, she said, we have so many people at standing, we don't even do standing room because of the fire laws.
Right, right.
So some very wonderful British soldiers said, we've got seats available here. Some of our people couldn't come. Come sit down.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
So we got to experience the entire service.
Right.
And there was a composer who was commissioned to do a piece. And the way the piece began was you heard one B-24 take off, and
Oh.
then another B-24 take off, and then another B-24 take off. So the church was filled with this mass of the sounds of engines.
Right, right.
And what they used to do is they used to go up and they'd start circling till their entire squadron came or their entire bomb group. And then other bomb groups from other areas would come in. And out over the North Sea is where they would all congregate before they started flying off to Germany and France.
Right.
So that's the sound that you got in the church.
Oh my goodness.
And
Wow.
again, God Save the Queen was the king, the queen, God Save the Queen, the national anthem, America Beautiful, the Beautiful. It was all woven into this tapestry of music
Oh
before
my
the service
gosh.
even began.
Oh my gosh, that just sounds amazing. His use of like the plane, the engine sounds, the whole composition. Oh my goodness. Wow.
And we also had theater tickets, um, and a troupe of folks in Norwich, England. This was all in Norwich, England, put on a play that was also a musical where they wove in all the really famous swing pieces.
Wow.
And the name of the play was We Will Meet Again.
Oh, interesting.
So that was the trip with mom and dad. We met, mom died in 2002, and they were scheduled to go back to visit this friend. So here's the story. Dad's on his ham radio in Pennsylvania, and he hears this British accent, and he gets this guy to come on and talk. And Dad said, I was there in England during the war. And the man said, well, where were you? And Dad said, a little tiny place called Rackheath, England. And the man said, well, I know where that is. I live not far from there.
Oh my goodness.
So they just made this agreement that they would talk and talk and talk. Every week they talked. I went home to see my dad, and on the dining room table was this big white envelope. And he said, look at the address. Well, it came from England.
Oh, it did.
And then he opened it up and it had all these newspaper clippings and things about the war, and it came from Ian.
Oh my
Ian,
goodness.
Ian was the man that
Right.
he went. So that's how we got to meet Ian. Dad went again in 2002. They took a trip to, there is a museum library
Mm-hmm.
in Norwich, and it's now called the American Museum, dedicated to the 2nd Air Division, which is my father's division. There were 14 air bases in the 2nd Air Division, They all flew B-24s. At the end of the war, they collected money for a trust.
Oh, wow.
And the idea of the trust was they weren't going to build a monument, they were going to build a library.
Oh, I think that's fabulous.
And the library then would be dedicated. So Dad said when he left, he gave them $25. That was a chunk of change. That was a huge amount of money in
Yeah,
1945.
in 1945. Yeah, exactly.
So when he got back, um, when he went back to England and found out that indeed there was a library, he was thrilled.
Oh, yeah.
The library itself had burned down. So
Oh,
what was left of that was housed in an old furniture store called Glaswell's. And when Dad walked into the American Library, they had this little dinky plastic plane, plastic B-24.
right.
And Dad said, "That's not going to do."
No, it's not.
He was building one,
Oh, he was.
7.5 feet wingspan. When it was finished, he made all of the markings on it for the Witchcraft. The Witchcraft is the most famous plane in the entire 8th Air Force.
Oh, wow.
137 missions, 130 of them qualified, no aborts, no loss of life.
Right. Amazing.
Coming back with holes, with engines out, with parts of tails missing,
Yeah.
still made it through the entire war. And so he wrote to the American Library and said, "I'm going to donate it."
Right. Oh, fabulous. Oh my goodness.
And um, the librarian at the time, the trust person at the time, thought it was going to be too big. And Dad explained it's only 12 inches tall and it will hang very well from the ceiling. So anytime I go to England, I'm going to Norwich, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Well, and it really
I
gives that feeling of how wide the wingspan was, the whole, it adds to the stories and the information that I'm sure is collected in the library.
It is. The library now has, when Dad passed away, um, I'm the keeper of the memorabilia. I'm the keeper of the photography. My brother and sister both asked me to do that. So I found the plans and the schematic, the blueprints for building the plane.
Oh, wow.
And those are now in the library.
Yeah,
I thought that the library should have those. So again, when we go to England, and we still go a lot, there's never a time that I don't get to Norwich, that Kirk and I don't get to Norwich so that we can see the plane hanging from the ceiling in the library.
right. Oh, what a great use too of the funds to create an actual library and have the forethought, thought like people need to see this information. People need to understand even our story, the stories of these airmen and what they went through, what happened,
Mm-hmm,
all of that.
mm-hmm. So it's very interesting too, because every year they get a student from the United States to do their internship at the library. An American student does their internship at the library. So that keeps things going on. They have programs all year long. Um, they celebrate American holidays.
Oh, wow. That's
So it really is a library that's dedicated. And there is, I think, a larger recognition of what the United States did in England than there is here.
oh, I think I would have to agree, you know.
You could go to England now and you could go to air bases all around the country. Not all of them have been kept totally. Some of them have been kept more, but you can go to air bases and each one will have its own little museum.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I've gone, I'm now president of the 467th Bomb Group Association,
Oh,
which is
wow.
my
Right.
dad's bomb group. We went last year. I stood on the runway that my father flew off of.
Oh, you did. Oh, wow.
I stood on the runway.
I know, I love that. I mean, to go back to where he was spending, countless hours and just each time going up, not knowing, not knowing that unknown, am I going to come
Yep.
back to this runway?
Yeah, I would definitely suggest to your audience that they watch the Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks series that's now on Apple Plus called Masters of the Air.
Yeah, I'm going to.
It'll it'll give you a real feeling of what it was like to be in the Air Force during those times. Um, they did the South Pacific, they did Band of Brothers, but in England, there is just such honor afforded the United States and the role that they played in bringing that war to an end. When we were there in 1995, we were in the Green Man pub. Now, this is a pub where my father might have spent some time.
Right.
And the minute he walked in and they heard his American accent, he was just surrounded by people
Oh, wow.
who wanted to ask him questions and and find out, where and how he participated. For Mom and I, this pub was decorated in red, white, and blue bunting. All of the staff people were in World War II uniforms.
Oh my
The
goodness.
music,
Oh,
the
wow.
music that was playing was 1940 swing. And of course, Glenn Miller's In the Mood came on, and my mother and I were out of our seats like a shot, dancing because she's the one that taught me. So there's that part of my love for travel is the history
Yes.
that definitely includes my dad.
Right. And you've written a book too tell us about the book.
The book is called Flying with Dad, a daughter, a father, and the hidden gifts from his stories of World War II. And in 2008, Dad and I were on the phone. He lived 6.5 hours away, and it was generally his doctor's appointments, his dialysis treatments, the in home care that he was getting, all that kind of stuff. We would talk about that, and then he and I would kind of stall. I wasn't a sports fan. I'm not a sports fan,
Yeah.
but on one night, heaven only knows why, he opened up and told me a story. Funny, quirky, off the wall, about making an emergency landing in freed Belgium towards the end of the war. Their third engine was out.
Oh my goodness.
And their third engine is where the hydraulics are.
Right.
So, um, in the midst of this conversation, I said to my dad, let me get a pencil and paper.
Yeah.
What the hell do you want to do that for? I said, I said,
Typical
because this is,
dad. Yeah.
yeah, this is really interesting. The very next week, April, I said to him, if you're willing, start at the beginning.
Yeah.
Story after story after story after story started rolling off his tongue.
Oh my goodness.
And at some point in taking down notes for all these stories, I said, I've got a book.
Right.
So Dad saw the first draft. That was his Christmas present, the Christmas before he died. It took 11 years and 4 rewrites to
11
get it.
years. Oh my goodness.
11 years and 4 rewrites to get it into into something that was definitely publishable.
Right.
And so, yeah, the book is Flying with Dad.
And it's all these collections of his recollections of being a pilot, the war, what his, wow.
He was a navigator.
Okay.
Okay. Um, the first section of the book, it's not strictly a history. So for your audience, the first section of the book explains our family, and it gives you a sense of how Dad and I were disconnected.
Mm.
I knew he loved me. There was food on the table, a roof over my head. He was always down the hall asleep at night. But to talk to me about the things that were important to me or to comfort me when I was crying, not him.
Right.
The second part of the book is his experiences before the war. He never would have had to have gone. He
Oh,
repaired airplanes, which gave him a presidential deferment to stay in the United States. He An AT-6, which is a training plane, came into the depot that he was working at. No wing. Dad called around to all the different depots. No wing.
oh my gosh.
So he asked for the blueprints and built it.
Oh, he did. Oh, wow.
17 and a half feet of a wing. The test pilot, knowing how the wing came to be, came over to my dad and said, "Is it going to fly?" Dad said,
Yeah.
"Yeah." "You're sure it's going to fly?" "Mm-hmm." "Well, good, son, get in, because if it goes down, you're going down with it." So it's a two-seater. So
Right.
Dad's in the back seat and the pilot is testing it. And his exact words to me were, "Hon, I didn't want to fix him anymore. I wanted to fly him."
Really?
So he petitioned to get out of his deferment to eventually go overseas. Now, my publisher said, "Yvonne, I want you to write that section in your father's voice." And I thought, how in the world am I supposed to do that?
Yeah, I was gonna say on my head's thinking that too, like,
I have all Dad's letters to Mom during the war.
oh, you do. Oh, wow.
So I read and reread until I felt like I could get his voice.
Right. And how
The
he would
second
respond and how he would, right, interact with others.
the second section then goes all the way through till his death. The third section is how the writing of the book gave me the father I always wanted. And
Interesting.
he got a daughter that he didn't know he had. And he waited for me to get home for his final flight.
Right.
And I was with him. So that then became the second book, Dying with Dad. And it's sad in some places, yes, but Dad and I had very intimate conversations about what he wanted his end to be, how he wanted it to be. We made them legal. I could speak for him.
Right. Okay.
So he had been in the hospital. The social worker approached me and said, "When can he go home?" I said, "When he's ready." They sent him home. He called me. He was livid. He was in so much pain, and they couldn't give him the drugs from the hospital. He'd have to get them from the pharmacy, just the way it works.
Yeah, I know
Stupid.
there's so many issues with end of life here in this country.
So, in this conversation, Dad said to me, "Yvonne, I'm scared. Can you come home?"
Yeah.
And I said, "I'll be there tomorrow." April, I was with him 2 hours and he was gone.
Wow.
But he went exactly the way he wanted to, which was feet first out of his own home.
Right.
EMTs were working on him. I called the hospital. I said, "He's got a DNR on his chart." The doctor called the EMTs and said you couldn't stop. So I laid down beside him and I told him that I loved him. And I told him he was going to be with mom. And then the glue in our family was the Lord's Prayer. So I said the Lord's Prayer in his ear and he was gone.
Wow.
But they put him on the gurney, took him feet first down the steps, parked the gurney in front of the ambulance. The doors are open wide, the lights falling on Dad's face. And there's this soft, sweet smile.
Oh.
And I went, yes.
Right.
And the EMTs, looked at me like she's lost it,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Why is she right?
going to admit this woman to the hospital. And I said to them, you've given Dad his last wish, feet first out of his own home.
Right.
So that added to going back to England. There's never going to be a time I'll go to England that I won't get to Norwich and I won't get to that library so that I can see that plane
Right.
hanging up above on the ceiling.
What an incredible story. I mean, just everything, the relationship with your dad, like you said, growing up, being kind of distant, disconnected, but then coming full circle where he's opening up and sharing everything that happened and sharing so intimately.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm crying. So it's a good time to wrap it there. Oh my goodness,
Okay.
Yvonne. This has been fabulous. But just that interweaving of how important travel is, the arc, everything. So share with people how they can find the books. I think they're both sound beautiful and amazing. Something so much to share. So tell people how to find you.
Um, any online, they can order online. Lots of people have favorite independent bookstores. They just need the name of the book to go in and order it. You can see more about the books and about me at ingeniumbooks.com. That's my publisher's website. I don't have one of my own, but if anybody would like to reach out to me personally, lowercase YVONNEAUTHOR 4, the number 4 at gmail.com. Yvonne Author 4 at gmail.com.
Love it. Thank you so much, Yvonne. This has been fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thank you so much for picking up on it because I thought, I'll put it down that I traveled around on a VW Bug, we'll see what happens. And you clicked on it right away.
Yes, I did. Thanks, Yvonne. And I'll have all her links to her books, the website in the show notes. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.